Hi, welcome to the Noise Path. In this episode, I have something interesting to show you. What you're looking at are a pair of vacuum capacitors. Now, on that its own is not super unusual. We've used vacuum capacitors on the channel before. What makes these ones special is that these are mechanically tunable, so they are variable vacuum capacitors. And that makes things a lot more complicated because you're trying to move something inside of a vacuum structure. You have to have that seal around it and adjustability from the outside, which is kind of cool. So I want to show you how they work. Here on the left, we actually have one that's coupled with a DC motor, so you can electronically tune it. It turns some gears and moves things around, and I will show you exactly how that works too. But let's talk about some of these vacuum capacitors and what the advantages are. So let's start with something like this. This is also a variable capacitor. In fact, a really simple one. If you look carefully, you'll see that there are many plates, and every other plate is connected together. Therefore, all the even number plates are going to be the bottom terminal, and all the odd number plates are going to be the top terminal. And you can see that they are completely overlapping. Now, if I want to adjust the value of this capacitor, I just have to rotate this. And you can see that the plates move freely. And right over here, there's absolutely no overlap at all. And that's going to be the minimum capacitance situation. And all the way to the other side is going to be the maximum. And I can do partial overlap like so, which will give me all the inner values. So this is a parallel plate capacitor. The capacitance is predominantly determined by epsilon A over D. Epsilon is the dielectric constant, A is the area in which the two plates overlap, and D is their distance. Now there's also fringing capacitors and everything else which contribute, but let's just put that aside for a second. Which means that by rotating this, all I'm doing is I'm changing A, the overlap area between the two plates. If I want to increase the capacitance even further, well, what I can do is I can add a lot more plates. That just means more area. Or I can bring the D smaller, and I make them as close as I can. Now, there are several disadvantages with doing that. The first disadvantage is that this has to be mechanically a lot better, because if you bring them super close as you're rotating this, you better have really good mechanical tolerances. Otherwise, the plates will short each other, and that will just become a terrible capacitor. So that makes it difficult in one direction. From the other side, as I bring the plates closer and closer, I will reduce the breakdown voltage, because now I have an electric field that is going to be extremely strong between two plates, and eventually it's going to ionize the dielectric material. Now, what's the dielectric here? Well, it's just air, and that's another disadvantage, is because the epsilon is just 1, and therefore I cannot achieve a very high value of capacitance by playing with the dielectric material itself. Normal capacitors use a variety of dielectric materials to achieve higher and higher amount of capacitance. In fact, some ceramic capacitors can have dielectric constants in the tens of thousands in order to get a super tiny capacitor with a very high capacity. So these trade-offs are very common in capacitors. So what makes the vacuum one special? Well, it's basically almost the same thing with slightly different mechanical design. But the advantage there is that the air has been almost completely removed. And therefore, even though the distance between the plates is pretty close, there are very few molecules to ionize. So I can run it at very high voltages without it breaking down. In fact, those capacitors that you saw can withstand thousands of volts, which this guy definitely cannot. If I put multiple thousands of volts across this, it will arc across these plates. But if I suck all the air out, then it will be able to withstand that much more. And the other advantage of using air, or in that case vacuum, between the plates is that you have almost no dielectric loss at all. So the quality factor of the capacitor becomes extremely large, and it becomes a super low leakage. And that has its own advantages, especially if you have several thousand volts across it. So now you can imagine why the design of this becomes harder to do when it's in a vacuum environment, because all the sealing around, especially around the shaft, which needs to rotate this. Now that one doesn't rely on this parallel plate rotating in this way. It has a slightly different structure, which we will see. So now that we have a somewhat of an appreciation of what's going on, let's look and see how they've made the vacuum ones. Now, these variable vacuum capacitors also obviously need two terminals, and one terminal is here at the top, and this is typically the high voltage terminal. And the reason is because this thing over here rotates, and that's what adjusts the capacitance, but it is electrically connected to the other terminal of the capacitor. In fact, you can see that accordion structure, which collapses, that ultimately changes the distances, is electrically connected to everything. So that's one of the disadvantages of these. You don't really have truly two floating terminals of the capacitor. This bottom one has to be connected to whatever mechanically is moving it. But this one over here can be sitting at thousands of volts with respect to, let's say, a common ground. So if I go ahead and rotate this, you can see that it will rotate. And as I rotate it, that other one moves down, and it's separating from the top portion. Now, this thing doesn't fully separate, so we can see what's in between, but the other one does, so I can show you that. There you go, we are at the bottom. So you can see that they have completely separated from each other. So the capacitance right now is at its minimum value. And if I want to move it back, I just rotate this back. And as I rotate it back, you can see that they will collapse onto each other. So first of all, right away, you can see that those are circular patterns, and they're not using any other kind of unusual parallel plates that rotate the same way. They have concentric circles that overlap, and I'll show you that. If I keep unscrewing this, this actually completely comes off, and you can see how this is done. There you go. It's basically a screw on the inside, and then this thing pulls this back. So in fact, I should be able to pull this with my hand. You can see I can just pull it. That's all I'm doing. That's exactly it. So it's really more of a piston movement, and that is probably much easier to seal. And then that's how they move the plates. And we can put this guy back over here. You can connect that to some interesting mechanical structure and motorize it, and that's exactly what they have done with the other unit. So let's take a closer look at that one. And similarly here we have two terminals also. The top terminal where the high voltage typically is, and the bottom terminal right over here is connected to this entire chassis, so it's shared. Now this one is a bit more sophisticated. First of all, it has an encoder over here. So as this motor turns, this encoder also rotates. So you can find out which direction is rotating and the top and the bottom limits of this, because if you continue to turn it, you will destroy this capacitor. You have to be quite careful with it. And then there's a connector over here, which is that's how that works. That connector controls everything. And you can see that this motor turns this gear, which then in turn turns this gear. And if you look through it, you can see that rotates that worm screw and that moves this up and down. So it's pretty simple structure overall, mechanically speaking. Let me see if I can do some rotation on that. So if I turn this, you can keep turning it. There we go. If I can hold it steady. There you go. That structure. It's going to take a lot of turns. But eventually I should be able to bring that little two plates into view so you can see how it is actually made. And here we go with the exposure turned up. You can actually see how they make these capacitors. If you look carefully, you can see a whole bunch of copper cylinders that are concentric with different diameters. And on the other side, the other terminal, you have exactly the same thing, except you have a whole bunch of other cylinders that sit in between the top one. So exactly like before, we have odd and even plates, and they overlap, and depending on how much they overlap, the value of the capacitance changes. Now, the structure here has very good tolerances because these circles are really, really close to each other. And they brought them really close to get as much capacitance as they can while still having this multi-thousand volt of operation because of the vacuum inside a tube. So yeah, really cool structure and really mechanically quite beautiful. And these do look like they're copper or at least copper plated in some way. But yeah, very, very nice. So now you can obviously move that by rotating this. You can see that structure has already extended out. And if I rotate this, it just simply goes inside, and that cylinder gets pushed in, and then everything collapses back to each other. Yeah, that's how it works. Pretty neat. And you've probably already noticed the rating on it, right? So 5 kilovolt at maximum capacitance and 10 kilovolt at minimum capacitance. Now, it makes sense that at minimum capacitance, the rating is much higher because the plates are actually quite a bit further with much less overlap between them. But 5 kilovolt is still a lot for a capacitor with so many plates as close as they are and such a high quality factor. So that should be cool to test. We will certainly put 5,000 volts across it to make sure that it still is airtight, because if it isn't, then you will definitely arc inside. So we can try that. But let's connect it mechanically so we can see it move up and down with the motor. So I have connected the motor terminal directly to the power supply. I'm using a Rohde & Schwarz NGL202 in the back, which I've also done teardown reviews of on the channel. Now I'm not using any of the limiters, so I'm going to run the motor at 9 volts rather than 27 because it already moves pretty fast. So this thing can be tuned pretty quickly if you wanted to, but because of the huge gear down ratio, I want to make sure I don't damage anything and it doesn't overrun. So here we go. Let's see. And look at it go. It's going to extend. So nice. And then it's going to go all the way, let's say, somewhere around here. We'll stop it. Then I can switch the polarity of the input, like so, and then I can run it the other way. You can see it runs much faster this way because it's not running against the pull of the springy motion of the actual capacitor itself. So there we go. You can easily tune it like this. And here's a limit indicator and encoder here. This may look like a potentiometer at first glance, but it's not. It just has multiple terminals, and there's 2 of them on top of each other that tells you various locations of where this is. This combination with the rest of the circuitry, whatever that might be, will ensure that this will never run too hard into any of its end positions. Now we can of course measure the capacitance as a function of the mechanical adjustment, and for that I'm going to use the Zurich Instruments MFIA, which is an impedance analyzer as well as a lock-in amplifier. Probably one of the most feature-rich and capable platforms that you can get your hands on. I've done a full teardown and review of this on the channel, and we're going to use the Lab1 software to measure it. I've connected it to the Keysight Kelvin clips here because these ones have very large clip alligators that can go around the terminals of this capacitor, and this has standard spacing, so you can connect it essentially to any LCR meter interfaces that you want. Let's see what the capacitance is. And here we are with the Lab 1 software, which interfaces with the Zurich instrument MFIA. It is such a joy to use this. It's really made for engineers, so well thought out. If you haven't seen the review, definitely check it out. There's so many features and functionalities built into it. So first we're going to measure just some simple capacitor just picked from the bin, and it's directly connected to the Kelvin inputs. And this is a live picture which we'll be able to use later when we use our vacuum capacitor. The reason I do this is just to get an idea of how things are working, and everything should make sense. So we're measuring everything at 1 kilohertz with a 300 millivolt excitation signal. And you can see that the capacitance here in this case is about 5.4 nanofarad. Phase is about 89 degrees, which makes sense. It's well within the well-behaved region of this capacitor at 1 kilohertz. And the dissipation factor for this in the parallel mode is 15.8 times 10 to the minus 3. Okay, so not so bad. It's not a super high quality capacitor, but it's not a terrible capacitor neither. So it has no issue measuring dissipation factors in this magnitude. It can go significantly lower as well. But this will be interesting when we compare it to the vacuum one. And here we go. I have the capacitor connected directly to the Kelvin clips, and there's a couple of measurements we can do right away. First of all, we'll note that the capacitor value is pretty low. It's only 36.5 picofarad, and that is at its maximum value when the plates are fully overlapping. So this is most likely intended for tuning maybe a very high voltage transmitter or maybe a high voltage oscillator of some kind. And we'll see what the minimum value is in a second. The other thing to note is that this instrument is not really able to measure the dissipation factor. And that's because the value of the parallel resistance is just so high that it cannot capture and show us a meaningful dissipation. It's just jumping back and forth and even goes to positive and negative. So if I go over here and ask to give me that parallel resistance, you can see that it's just stuck around the gigaohm region. So it's below the measurement capability of this instrument, which is already very good. So that's to be expected. Now what we can do is we can put it in the plotter, which is going to show us the value of the capacitance as a function of time, so we can adjust it. A few things to note is that I can bring my hand close to it, and you can see that I can change the value of the capacitance ever so slightly, and that's because it's coupling to my hand, and there will be some losses, and that's going to change the value of the capacitor. The other thing to note is that even though I have put a plastic cover on the other terminal for adjusting it mechanically, touching it will add a lot of noise to the system. And that's because that's one of the terminals. That's one of the disadvantages of this, as we talked about earlier. So I'm going to have to hold on to it anyway to see what happens during the adjustment. All right, well, let's give it a try. I'll do my best not to touch it too much. Here we go. I'm going to rotate this. And check it out. Look at the value of the capacitance. It's dropping. I can keep going until we are at the minimum value this thing can support. Let's see how low it can go. Just hold it a little bit like that. It can go faster. Here we go. We'll go all the way to the bottom and then I'll let it go. There it is. It's at this minimum value. There you go. If I let it go now, what do we have? We have a capacitance of about 16.5 picofarad. So it went from about 16 to 36, which is pretty good. That's more than a factor of 2. So even though the movement of this capacitor was limited, it still managed to get over a factor of 2 of adjustment. And of course, everything else remains the same. You can see if I go to the numeric, yeah, the parallel resistance here is still very, very high, unmeasurable essentially. But yeah, a factor of 2 is pretty good. Let's go back to the plotter. If I go the other way, I should be able to get it back to exactly where it was. We go all the way to the other end, and that's it. Put it back down. Here we go, going back to exactly where it is. So it is very predictable as well. If you have a good control of the rotation, which is what the other one is trying to do by measuring exactly where it is, you can do a loop feedback system and even do automatic adjustment. Pretty neat. So now I've gone ahead and changed the setup to our other variable vacuum capacitor, which is motorized, and we can see that we have the positive terminal here at the top, and the bottom one is the entire negative terminal. So there's going to be some limitations on how well we can measure capacitance this way, and we have it connected to a motor so we can retract this and see what the range of the capacitance is. Now, interestingly enough, you can see that the value of this capacitance is significantly higher, over 500 picofarad, but you saw that this thing can be extended almost completely out. So I expect this capacitance to approach almost 0 at some point or below the measurement capability of the unit. All right, let's give it a try and turn on the power supply so we can begin retracting this. Here we go. You can see it's starting to move. That's the noise from the motor. Look at how much noise from the motor is picked up here. Again, nothing's isolated really well. I'm going to wait until it's completely separate from each other. And then stop motor. I think it should be good around here. Yeah, so at the very bottom, yeah, it's noisy. Just we're picking up a whole bunch of junk around. But you can see that the value is basically essentially 0 at this point. So yeah, the tuning range is enormous for something like this. It is mechanical and slow, but it would be nice if the bottom plate was isolated. You can actually play some tricks and do that, but in this case, yeah, it's a tough measurement for capacitance of these small values. So now let's try putting several thousand volts across our vacuum variable capacitor and see if it survives. I have already configured it to its maximum capacitance such that the piston is essentially all the way up. That should be able to do 5,000 volt. That's the worst case scenario, so we can put that much under it. By the way, what you see here on the right side, this is also a high voltage capacitor. This is a 25 nanofarad 20,000 volt capacitor. This is not a vacuum one, but it's a very high quality. You can see the size of this. Now, interestingly, the amount of stored energy in this capacitor is less than 1/6 of this one. This is a 10 farad 2.5 volt capacitor. But of course, the crucial difference here is that this guy can expel his energy pretty easily. Imagine you have a 1 ohm resistor. In theory, for a very short amount of time, this guy can create 20,000 amps, whereas this one can only do 2.5 amps. So of course, that makes a big difference, even though this has much less energy. This is still would be very dangerous when it is fully charged, of course. There's a lot of energy still stored in that. All right, let's give it a try. Okay, so you're looking at the display over here. That's the applied voltage, and that's the current, and that's the set voltage. So let's go ahead and turn it on first. So starting easily with 1,000 volt, you saw that the capacitor charged, and 1,000 volt is no issue. Here's 2,000, and again, for a brief moment, we'll draw some current, and then quickly goes back to 0. And then I can just go all the way to 5,000. Here we go. There it is. Let's see what happens. There you go. That is a 5,000 volt across that capacitor. You can see that there's a little bit of current, and that current I think is mostly just corona discharge because it's going to come off the top a little bit. There should be very, very little leakage from inside the capacitor itself. We saw this resistance is very high. Yeah, so it survives without any issues at this voltage across it. Indeed, the vacuum does make a really big difference. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this quick video. If you want to support the channel, it's really simple, either through Patreon or PayPal in the video description. And I hope you learned something new about these vacuum capacitors. I have a whole bunch of really cool videos coming up in the next couple of months across a wide range of topics, so make sure you subscribe not to miss them. See you next time.